Hello and welcome to Projector, and on this installment, the Ice Age is threatened when a giant asteroid heads on a collision course with Earth. When Scrat, voiced by Chris Wedge, accidentally launches an alien ship buried in the ice into space, his antics end up sending an asteroid heading straight for Earth. Back on the planet, the Herd, led by Ray Romano's Manny, John Leguizamo's Sid, and Denis Leary's Diego, survive an initial meteor shower, and Buck, voiced by Seann Pegg, arrives soon after to tell of an ancient prophecy foretelling of the impact that will hit in the same spot that several previous extinctions occurred. Now they must head towards the crash site and find a way to ensure their own survival. How did we get here? That's probably the question that most adult audiences dragged to see Ice Age Collision Course will be asked themselves. How did we get here? And it's a perfectly valid question. The original Ice Age is not a classic by any stretch of the imagination, but it's a fairly solid, well-made, very sweet animated film about this makeshift family that forms in this herd that brings a baby back to its human owners. But that was very much overshadowed by all the bits with Scrat that had a real Roadrunner-esque quality that became very popular with audiences. The film was a big hit all the way back in 2002 and launched Blue Sky Studios. The sequels came very belatedly 4 years later. I didn't actually watch any of the sequels at the time until I had to review the fourth film a couple of years ago, at which point I ran the series. And boy, is there a massive drop-off in quality between the first film and the second film and all the sequels beyond that. Because the tone of the sequels is quite different from the original film. The sequels feel very, very forced. They feel very slapstick heavy, very much playing towards the kids in the audience. My general feeling about the Ice Age films is they feel more and more like an animated sitcom. This is basically a furrier version of Everybody Loves Raymond, given that Ray Romano is in the lead role. And Collision Course really doesn't help that, because in its opening segments, it basically lists the plot of a sitcom. Like, you have the fact that Manny and Ellie are celebrating their anniversary, but oh no! He's forgotten her anniversary! How many times have we seen that particular plot line? Or the fact that their daughter Peaches is going to leave the nest and she's bringing her new fiancé, and the father doesn't really like him very much. Have you seen that on TV? I'm pretty sure you have. Many times before. This series has gone for 14 years. The people that saw the original film when they were 10 are now in their mid-20s now, and they could probably raise a kid of their own by this point. But unlike Toy Story, which is a similarly long-running franchise that helped launch an animated studio, this series hasn't grown up with those people. With each passing entry, it's actually regressed. The characters barely even resemble what they were like in the original film. They're like photocopies of photocopies. Take Diego, voiced by Denis Leary. In the original film, he was a quite threatening presence within the group because we weren't sure if he was going to betray them, and he had this quite sinister quality to him. By this point in the series, that character has been so watered down that the only thing that he offers is pessimism and snarky one-liners. There is a whole supporting cast of characters that were in previous entries that are only here because they were in those movies, but not because they have any role to play in the proceedings. Among your obnoxious cast of characters, you have Crash and Eddie, a comedic double act voiced by Josh Peck and Sean William Scott, who do nothing but slow down the film with pratfalls. Wanda Sykes reprising her role as the cantankerous granny, going around being sassy and smacking people in the head while also being completely oblivious to the danger around her. You've got Jennifer Lopez as the love interest for Diego, who has so little to do in this movie that I don't even think she has 10 lines in total. She is basically a background player the entire time. At one point, I almost forgot she was in the movie altogether until she suddenly popped out of the background and I went, oh, she's in this movie still. I completely forgot. At times you wonder if every character from the previous Ice Age films is going to come back. Buck, no relation, reprised by Simon Pegg, comes back from the third film, Dawn of the Dinosaurs, and he's given such a main role in this movie that he could basically be the lead character. And trust me, a little of that character's shtick goes a very long way. Going around with split personalities and being very oddball and weird, Pegg throws himself into the role with great gusto, and I normally like Simon Pegg, but I found him really grating and obnoxious. But he's basically this movie's mascot. He sums up the entire movie in a nutshell. Very scattershot and all over the place and very ill-disciplined. The story is almost pathetically thin in this film. I'm not asking for watertight logic in a children's film, but a semblance of internal logic would be nice. If Scrat sent the asteroid towards Earth, why is there a bit of scripture predicting that the asteroid would head towards it? And why is the asteroid going to crash in the exact same spot as the previous asteroids that wiped out civilizations were going to? And for that matter, technically, the previous asteroid that's wiped out the dinosaurs didn't actually do that because, as we've already established in this universe, which is reprised in this movie, the dinosaurs live inside the Earth, so they technically survive. Oh, but they quickly hand-wave that one. Buck said something along the lines of, oh, well, this time the asteroid will wipe out everything. Going underground won't save us. That feels really lazy, guys. Really, really lazy. And speaking of lazy, the gags here are atrocious. This is the sort of hack work that you would normally see out of, again, a sitcom. The sort of pulp culture referencing that passes as jokes. So you have all these sorts of anachronistic lines like, oh, you look nothing like your profile picture. Because apparently this Ice Age has internet dating profiles. There's a gag about hashtags, because apparently they have Twitter in this universe now. And let's not forget the bajillion movie references in here. Like Armageddon, for instance. They have a gag where they spoof Armageddon, that shot where they're all walking out in slow motion. As they set out to do the asteroid, they're all walking in slow motion, set to a portion of the theme from Armageddon. Do you remember that movie? It's even older than the original Ice Age. Timely. I bet the kids will love that. In fact, the gags here are so unimaginative, so uninspired, that other movies have come out before this one and done the exact same jokes before them. Take, for instance, the Angry Birds movie, which had a scene where they're all practicing yoga, and for some reason this movie has the same thing and has the exact same joke about doing downward dog and putting their butt in someone's face. And the same could be said for the Neil deGrasse Tyson cameo. I think even calling it a cameo might be a stretch. It's virtually a supporting role. It's by far his biggest appearance this year, and, you know, that might have been funny had I not seen it in both Batman v Superman and Zoolander 2 this year, and somehow this cameo manages to be even more self-indulgent than the latter. He voices one of the split personalities in Buck's head, while also serving as the film's narrator, because this film hadn't already got a tenuous grasp on the fourth wall already. Even the story elements here are things they've done in previous films. The idea that Scrat causes the cataclysm that instigates the plot is a rehash of several other previous sequels. They discover a hidden society, which is again taken from the third movie. This Geotopia plotline, where they discover inside the asteroid this hidden society that has been given eternal youth by the crystals inside it. This is where he meets Sid's love interest. If you remember my review of the fourth film, I joked, well, in the next one they've got to give Sid a love interest because it's the only thing they haven't done. And sure enough, that's exactly what happened, because it didn't really take much guesswork. And Sid, for the first half of this movie, spends much of his time moping around about how he doesn't have a girlfriend and no one loves him, and this gets resolved by the arrival of Brooke, voiced by Jessie J. She's making her film debut here, and boy is she not suited for voice acting. I mean, she's trying her hardest, but she sounds really out of place in this movie, and her performance is quite weak in general. I have no idea why the Ice Age movies insist on putting pop stars in their films. It's funny how there's so many characters coming back from previous entries in this film, but there's a new character here that's given no introduction whatsoever. I'm talking about Julian, Peach's fiancé, voiced by Adam Devine. He's basically a slacker character that's trying to get Manny's affection, but Manny really doesn't like him, and you can completely understand why. He's a sycophantic suck-up. He really comes across as a creep, actually, just how much he's desperate for Manny's approval, and he's never remotely funny. When he gets clubbed around the head in a hockey game, you almost feel compelled to cheer. He's that annoying. And I legitimately spent much of this film wondering, was he a character that was in a previous film that's been given main character status now? No, he's a new character that's just come out of completely nowhere. Speaking of new characters, we have these dinosaurs that are chasing Buck through much of the movie that serve as completely pointless antagonists. Their objective is to stop the herd from preventing the asteroid hitting Earth, because the leader feels that he can take over the Earth once it's been destroyed. This doesn't even remotely make sense, and that's meant to be the joke. Like, oh man, that's a really bad plan. No, these characters are pointless. There is no point having villains in this movie when there is a giant asteroid in the sky that's about to destroy all life on Earth. That is your antagonist. You don't need these characters in your already overstuffed film. Alas, even the Scrat sequences, usually the high points of the Ice Age films, feels really worn out by this point. It's said that you can tell when a series has run out of ideas when they go into space. Well, that's exactly what happens to Scrat in the first 30 seconds of this film, drawing the likes of Jason Voorhees and Pinhead. And the sequences are sporadically amusing. They're very much sort of movie parodies, the likes of Gravity and Alien. There are quite a few moments where I did laugh, especially with a teleporter gag that's a riff on Star Trek and The Fly, but really there isn't much here that you haven't already seen in the advertising materials, especially if you went and saw Peanuts, which had the 5-minute Ice Age shorts in front of it, which was actually the opening sequence of this movie that they just put in front of that one. If you've seen that, you've seen almost everything that Scrat has to offer, because he's not in this movie for very long. There are long stretches of this film that go by without having Scrat in it, and the final gag with Scrat is a real disappointment. There is nothing on the level of inspired genius like the Nutlantis bit in the previous film. The Scrat sequences culminate on a bit of a whimper. There is one major positive here, however, and that is the animation. The animation here is fantastic. It's funny how the Ice Age movies keep getting worse and worse, but they keep looking better and better. And you can really tell that the animators have used the action movie premise to expand the scope and scale of the story. There's very much a grand sense to the animation, and you can really see that in the Figaro sequence, which is really ambitious. It's this long 2-minute scene, and there's all these complicated elements, and they're going through various different surroundings, and it's all done in a continuous shot. It's a great moment in an otherwise very subpar movie, and it's easily the highlight of the 3D presentation, which is otherwise fairly unremarkable. But generally it reiterates my feelings about Blue Sky's output, in that they have some terrific animators and a great visual style, but their scripts are really not up to par. And I can understand why they keep going back to the Ice Age movies, because they're very successful, they're very popular, but also they launched the studio. You can understand that there's a lot of affection for the series within the studio. But really, guys, it's time to cut the cord. This series needs to come to a stop now. And in this movie's defence, it does look like they are attempting to wrap things up. At the end of the movie, you could very easily see this as the ending of the franchise. However, knowing this series, I wouldn't put it past them to do a 6th film. Please, guys, move on. You desperately hope the end is nigh for the Ice Age franchise when watching this 5th entry that's scarcely an echo of the original film by this point. It's degenerated into an animated sitcom with lame and lazy pop culture references passing as jokes, complete with subplots about missing anniversaries and a daughter flying the nest, and absolutely loaded with characters that have no reason to be here except they were in previous entries. There's an air of creative bankruptcy throughout, with a flimsy, almost nonsensical story that retreads beats we've seen in previous sequels. Even the scenes with Scrat feel tired this time out. The irritatingly slapstick tone means this is pretty much for kids only, but this is a series that deserves to be put out of its own misery. Coming up soon is the absolutely fabulous movie Just That. Matt Damon emerges from the shadows as Jason Bourne, and Kelsey Grammer goes for broke in Breaking the Bank. But until then, I'm Matthew Buck, fading out.